My name is Richard Lewis Ackerman. I was born in 1921 in Union City, Indiana. I was born and raised on a farm. I learned to drive in a horse and buggy back in those days. And then the war come along. I enlisted in the Navy. Before I went in the Navy, I was reading Zane Grey books in 7th grade of school. And my dad come along and took my Zane Grey book away from me and gave me an article in a magazine about the Matanuska Valley, because they was going to give the farmers 160 acres in the Matanuska Valley back then. And he was thinking about going and taking the whole family. 3 girls and 3 boys, and my mom and grandma.
The bus driver came to pick us up and he told my mom that there was a moose across the bay, across Mud Bay. And so she put on her winter coat and over her, I think she was wearing like insulated underwear or something, and she just threw on her coat and drove down there, and she shot this moose across the bay. And my dad was out fishing, and she didn't know what was she going to do now. She had a moose down across the bay, so she went over to the cannery, and they brought over a loader and went across the flats and picked up her moose and brought it back and dumped it in our yard. And every one of them was like, "Gene, you should have known you couldn't shoot a moose that far away." And she said, "Well, I didn't know I couldn't do it, so I did it."
When I grew up, I had hunting and fishing in my blood right off the start. The power of the blood is way beyond my imagination. The picture of my dad there, I am what I am because of him. He didn't have to teach me anything. He didn't have to say nothing. I have his blood, and all my success is just the power of the blood. It's just the way it is.
When I first moved to Juneau, 8 years old, straight out of the village, this was my first real exposure to white people. And baseball was a good example of what I had to deal with. Eskimos don't raise their voices at each other. If an Eskimo raises their voice at you, it means they're either drunk or crazy. And they had this game of baseball where people are always yelling at each other. It looked to me like they were nuts. And the first thing I learned about baseball is never get close to the ball, because the closer you get to the ball, the louder they yell and the more they're yelling at you. And if you can stay away from the ball, they leave you alone. And so I had a very short career in Little League.
We left Seward for military reasons. They had broken the code, and it referred to the Japanese attacking the islands of the North Pacific. And of course they thought that meant the Aleutians. And so we were given 24 hours notice, and this was a month before Pearl Harbor. And all the people from the interior, all the military families, came down on the train, and we were evacuated on the SS St. Mihiel. It was a big troop transport.
The wolf wandered into the yard at the homestead with his nose all full of porcupine quills. I figured out a way to trap him. He was pretty weak, hadn't eaten in a long time. Tied him up and brought him up to where we had a storm fence, and I held him between 2 pieces of storm fence, and then took a pair of pliers. So I pulled all the porcupine quills out and tied him up, and we fed him, and then put another piece of storm fence over him, untied him, and let him loose. And he stayed around the house for the next year. He was kind of our pet. One day a bear chased Mom and I up on the roof, and we spent the whole day there. We were out picking berries, and there wasn't enough time to make it to the door. We went up the ladder onto the roof and pulled the ladder up, and the bear stayed right around the base of the house there all day until Dad got home from work, and he finally ran the bear off. It was quite an exciting first year in Alaska for an 11-year-old like me.